And we are live. What's going on, everybody? I am Adam. This is Highly Articulated. I apologize for being a little bit late. I had an irate, inconsolable 2-year-old who did not want to go down for a nap. So I had to handle that business first, which delayed me a couple minutes. But we're here now. So let's talk about toys. Let's talk about toy rules. Do you guys have toy collecting rules? I'm always curious. I know that I have my parameters. I don't think I would call them rules because my toy collecting rules are a little bit like the English language. For every rule, there's probably more exceptions than than there are like hard and fast rules. So we'll talk about that in a minute. There's a couple other things that I want to talk about briefly. And then I also thought, since my little rant on rules or parameters for collecting might take 5 minutes and it might take 50 minutes, I don't know. If there's time left, we can do kind of ask me anything. I'll take questions. I know that I get questions sometimes in the comments, and I either they're sort of not relevant or whatever, but I'm gonna say ask anything. I will star the questions, and then at the end I'll kind of circle back and I'll just go through them sort of in order. They don't have to be related to anything we're talking about. I guess I would prefer if they're toy related, but other than that, it's gonna be fair game. So let's get into it, shall we? The first thing that I wanted to look at, and this is just I've noticed this just sort of sitting and sitting and sitting, and I feel like for the last 4 or 5 days, I've been looking at the numbers on this thing, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So the Hasbro Pulse HasLab GI Joe Classified Series Cobra Rattler Ground Attack Jet, which is currently in funding. So this launched at San Diego Comic-Con a couple weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago. I can't even remember how long ago it was. To quite a lot of fanfare, but not I feel like there hasn't been a ton of actual coverage of it. I don't think people are really talking about it as much as previous HasLabs, maybe. And I think there's a couple things going on. I think this is a really solid offering for one thing. I think that a lot of people are excited by this. But there's no like controversy. There's no bag of bones. There's no hidden unlocks. The numbers seem right, as far as when things get unlocked and stuff like that. I'm just kind of I guess I'm just confused because it's like for the last couple HasLabs, I feel like it's been all over the place, and I just don't feel. And maybe I've just not been paying attention. Admittedly, it may entirely be the case that I've not been paying close attention, but it feels like there's not a whole lot of fanfare going on with this one, and it's interesting. As I said, I've been sort of paying attention to it, and of note, they have the little bar for how this thing is tracking, and it right now it's at 13,911 backers. I feel like it's been at 13.5, 13.6 for like 3 or 4 or 5 days, or it could have been 2 weeks. I don't even really know. But 14,000 is the next unlock, and the next unlock is of course the gunner. So So there's the unlocks there. We got the patches. Hey, well done, everybody. We got the patches. I like the patches. I whatever. They're just packed in there. I don't really care. But the gunner unlocks at 14,000, and it feels like it's taking forever to get that gunner unlocked. Personally, I think the gunner is gonna get unlocked, whether that's tomorrow or the next day or something like that. I think it's gonna get unlocked pretty soon. But I think it's a must for this because it is a two-passenger vehicle. You got Wild Weasel as the pilot, but you also need that gunner in the gunner's seat there too. So yeah, I'm glad that we're gonna get it. I just can't believe that it's taken this long to get it. Um, there he is. There's the Cobra Rattler gunner. I part of me thinks that maybe this should have been included, and then maybe there should have been like two other figures to unlock. But I'm not going to get into the what did Hasbro do, what they should have done, and on and on and on. I'm sure they ran the numbers, and this is sort of the way that they decided to do it. um I'm excited for the gunner. I do like that you get a figure to go in the vehicle, that you don't have to put a trooper or a named figure or something in there, because anytime you've got a vehicle with two seats, I feel like just by default it needs to have two figures that go with it, that are sort of dedicated to it. um Now, as I say that, I just realized that, like, the Stinger and the Vamp only come with one, but those are ground kind of transport vehicles, so I guess they're kind of they don't really fit. I mean, a plane seems a little bit more specialized in terms of who would need to be in there. So, yeah, I just wanted to pull that out because, like, man, the most successful of these crowdfunding projects and the least successful, this middle ground, this, like, a couple weeks in, and like it just drags. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like nothing's happening, but I'm sure that people are looking at this and deciding whether they're going to back. There's all the people that backed at the beginning. I think it was 11,500 backers within the first 2-3 days. And then it's just that slow trickle all the way to like 3 days left, and then we'll see another spike. I have no doubt that the gunner will fund. I have no doubt that the flight suit Baroness will fund as well at 18,000. You just wish it would happen sooner, because I feel like more people might jump in if everything got unlocked and you just sort of had the full offering a little bit sooner. But I mean, there's the full offering, and I think it's pretty phenomenal. This thing is absolutely bonkers. And I really only I really only brought that up largely because of collecting rules. I had said that I probably wouldn't get a plane if they did a plane. And now I kind of broke that rule. I did say that if the wings folded up, I was much more likely to get this, and so they made it with folding wings, and so they kind of got me on it. You know, uh, they kind of got me. I do have a spot that where I can hang it from the ceiling, which I will probably do because I don't have any wall space left. I can't put it on the wall. I know, like, Dan Larson, for example, has some planes that are mounted on the wall, and he's going to do that with the Rattler, I think he said. But I would want to hang it, try to make it accessible so that I could pull it down and play with it. But anyways, um, yeah, that's the Rattler. Let me jump into the comments, and then I will talk about another figure that sort of lends itself to the sort of rules that I have. But anyway, stars hanging out. Brick something said, gonna listen while handling other business, but my only real rule that's sparingly been broken is that humanoids have to be in scale-ish with one another, with Legions 1.0 as the average size. So Brick is collecting in a 110 7-inch scale, 6-inch scale, sort of in there. Now that's humanoids. Now I know that he also has the rules are a little more liberal when the figures themselves aren't humanoid, because you can kind of fudge that, because that's then that gets into more the fantastical aspects of things. And then, animals, it's like, yeah, where does how big is an animal really? You put it in a humanish form. Does it have to sort of be proportionally the same size as the animal was to a human, or does that matter? So I know that Brick struggles with the humanoids, but with the beasties, I think it's a little more fast and loose. Um, and Brick says I pull characters from all sorts of lines into the universe. Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see, let's see. Star said I hope Adam joins us tonight. Yes, I apologize. I was a little bit late, but Collecting Brothers is here. He says only collecting rule for me, never Funko Pops. I have two Funko Pops. And I will explain that rule in a minute. Mick Zarzuela is here. What's going on? Good to have you. Brick says Fig's got to fit into the general science swords space sorcery vibe. No jeans, t-shirts, etc. Fair enough. Nolan is here. What's going on, Nolan? Good to have you. Um, uh, yeah, Star says when I envision a story or property, the figure has to measure up to those expectations. That's fair. AI says I have none, but my wife tries to make them for me. Better to ask for forgiveness than permission. That's my wife generally knows my sort of parameters, but she's sort of slowly coming around on her own and starting to like pick up random stuff on her own. What was the last thing? There was something, um, I can't even remember now. There was something that came up recently, and my wife was like, "Are you buying that?" And I was like, "Why do you ask?" Knowing full well that what she meant was she wants it. So, Mick says, "I guess my rule is if I don't know anything about it, I won't collect it. But if I do dip into it, I need to make sure is I can afford the line if I go on buying from the line." That's that's a good one too. That's a very good one, and one that uh, yeah, I'll talk about too. Um, isn't there usually a lull in the middle of the runtime? Huh? For my show? Yeah, all the time. There's a lull from about minute 1 till about the last minute. Um, AI, this is a very good one, and this is not really what I was sort of thinking of, but absolutely. AI says, I guess my one rule is I won't comment or dislike something unless I have had it in hand first. That's actually a really, really good rule. I will be the first to admit that when there's something that comes out that just doesn't make sense to me, I will say this doesn't make sense. I don't know who the market is for this, but um I think for me, as far as that goes, I also understand that like everything that gets made is somebody's favorite. Somebody loves everything. Otherwise, they don't make them. So Ray Paz is here. Ray Paz says it was a 45-day HasLab. Not sure what day it's at now. It's like more than halfway. I think there's um what is it? It says right at the very top. Let me scroll back without pulling that window back up. 22 days left. So we're right smack dab in the middle. At just under 14,000. So I mean I could see this thing doing 25, 26 thousand, which is way over what we need, the 18,000 to get that flight suit Baroness. So I think all the unlocks are not guaranteed, but statistically, I think it's pretty much a lock. I think if you were a betting man, it would be a pretty safe bet. AI says I backed one, debating ordering another. Man, yeah, that's the tough part. I've been getting two of most GI Joe vehicles because I like having two. The Rattler is a tough one. The Rattler's a tough one. I've said before, like planes aren't as easy to play with if you're applying any realistic rules of physics, because a plane has to sort of keep flying. So whoever's sort of playing with the plane is kind of just running around constantly. Whereas like the Dragonfly or when they do the fang. I'm not gonna say if they do the fang. I'm really hoping they do the fang. But, if you get a helicopter, it can just hover, right? It could just kind of float there. That's what helicopters do. So the plane aspect, the other thing too is like size wise, that wingspan, it's long and it's wide. It's got to either hang from your ceiling or go on your wall. Like, where are you going to put it? What is the shelf space? That's a big one for the rules for me, and that's part of this struggle. For real, part of the struggle is space. I am out of space. I don't have any space left. Um, Star says, first figure need is high quality plastic die cast construction. After that, everything else can fluctuate. That's a good one. Good getting good quality stuff is a good way to be. Curb says, I have a collecting rule, goblins. Yeah, fair enough. I've got a fair few goblins. I think at last count with the Mythic Legions goblins, I think there's only one that I don't have, but now I can't remember who it is. Thanos says I should have rules, but it's mostly just, is it cool? Nolan said, really my only rule is I have to actually like the figure, not being a completionist helps. Yep, definitely. And Star says, what if the figure's from present day story, like a zombie invasion? You wouldn't be interested. Star says a lull on Kickstarter. Yes, absolutely. A massive lull on any crowdfunding thing. You do see like steady growth, but it's nothing like the first 3 days and the last 3 days. That seems to be typically kind of the rule. So, yeah. Yeah, and it's exactly this. Most Kickstarters are big during the intro and big at the end. Absolutely. What I've noticed, and I'm not, I haven't run the numbers on this or anything, and there are exceptions. There are exceptions. The Engines Inventions did drop, but for any successful crowdfunding campaign, it seems as though um the first 3 days will be mirrored in the last 3 days, and the average for however many days you have in the middle seems to be like pretty consistent day over day. Um, and it tends to be fairly low. So like depending on what your numbers are, but that what I mean to say is like the graph um is very consistent, like surprisingly consistent. Um, which is so then it's sort of like how many days do you run through the middle, the boring part? Is there a way to sort of keep the hype going? Is there a way but anyway, that's we're not talking about how Kickstarters work today. We'll save that for another day. Ray Pass says once it hits that 14,000, we'll get another boost. We will have that Baroness. We're gonna have the Baroness. I would be shocked if we didn't get that Baroness. And then but I think we'll see a little bit of a boost at the 14,000, but I also think it doesn't really dramatically affect that average day number. Like I was saying, it seems to be that graph is very consistent. Solo Center says, I don't do repaints, land on the preferred look and go with that. All characters on the shelf should be individual. I really like that one. I like that one a lot. I am of a similar opinion. I'm trying to catch up on the comments, and then I'll sort of get into one more thing and then get into to my rules. Ray says time to add a toy room. I have a toy room. You're looking at it. This is it. There's no more rooms available for me. Let's see. Okay, Red 5 is here, and that is the most current comment. So that's awesome. Good to have you. And all right, so another thing I'm sort of looking at, and this is where some of my rules come into play big time. Um, so this is currently available from ecollectibles.ca. The executive replicas Captain Canuck 112 scale Captain Canuck figure. And if anybody's not familiar with Captain Canuck, you're not the only one. Captain Canuck is a comic book character that's been around for a long, long time. At least in Canada. He's definitely like an indie toy line. This is like indie toy line through and through because it's an indie comic based in Canada about a superhero who is Canadian. And it's not Alpha Flight Star. This is Captain Canuck. He has his own book, and there's a sort of a team of other superheroes in the world that he lives in. Um, but he's been around for a long, long time, and to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time he's ever had an action figure made. And as a Canadian, I feel compelled to buy this. As a comic book reader who is familiar with Captain Canuck, I feel compelled to buy this. However, this goes against so many of my sort of collecting parameters. Um, so okay, so here are some of my parameters. One, I typically buy toys from a line, and what I mean by that is I don't really look for one-offs. I don't really like to have one-offs. I like to have, at the very least, sort of a hero and a villain, if that's all there is. And if there's sort of more than that, I like to have, a hero, a villain, and then a couple army builders. And then if it's something like Animal Warriors of the Kingdom or G.I. Joe or Thundercats, where there's sort of like a whole team, then I kind of want the whole team. Thundercats is a good example of sort of the me trying to break my own rule. I had Lion-O and I had Mumra for a long time, and I was just like resisting getting more, and I finally caved, and I'm getting more of those Thundercats figures. But yeah, I struggle with Captain Canuck because he's not gonna be a shelf. There's not gonna be a shelf of the Captain Canuck world, if you will. Um, and the other stuff that the executive replicas line has doesn't really interest me. Like Grendel's there, and I would consider getting that, but I would consider getting it to sort of go on the shelf with my Captain Canuck. This Captain Canuck figure looks fantastic, and from everything that I've heard, the executive replicas figures are great. I just don't I don't know where I would put it. The other thing is space, because I have this limited amount of space. Anything that sort of becomes a new shelf, and I kind of, I look at my collection by shelf, and some things get multiple shelves, and that it might have to change when other stuff starts coming in. For example, I've got Animal Warriors of the Kingdom on two shelves. I've got GI Joe on two shelves. I've got Marvel Legends. How am I going to point at these two shelves? That's just my head that I'm pointing at. That's better. I've got Marvel Legends on two shelves. There's a few things that have two shelves that I'm trying to downsize to one shelf. But if it isn't going to fit a shelf, it has to sort of fit my island of Misfits toys. And that shelf's already full. So my Misfit toys include, like, Chester Cheetah and, Plunderlings, and like a couple things that just don't. My Cosmic Legion, my single Cosmic Legion figure is on that shelf as well. So something has to be really, really special to make it onto that shelf. What makes something sort of a really special one-off exception? If a friend of mine has done the line, if somebody that I know has done the sculpt, if it's Chester Cheetah, if another example I would buy way more of these if I could. Super 7 did Robin Hood and Prince John. So that's two figures. Now I do have a good guy and a bad guy, so it kind of fits within the rules. but they don't have a shelf. Obviously, there's only 2 of them. So, there's that on that shelf there. Um, my Marvel Legends is basically X-Men, but I do have the Fantastic Four. I do have, some throwback Avengers stuff. Not the full Avengers team, but just sort of, picking and choosing. I have Spider-Man, but I don't have really any of his the villains. Um, and so there's a whole bunch of stuff, but space is a big one. Space is a big one, and for a rule, I'm finding more so that space is the thing. Do I have room for it? And the struggle is that with 112 scale, 110 scale, 7-inch scale, whatever, the struggle is that they're way bigger than 118 scale. But then the opposite thing is like 118 scale doesn't look as good on a shelf, but it's really fun to play with, and you can get, vehicles and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, it's hard. As far as scale goes, I don't really have a rule for scale. I buy what I like sort of within those parameters. So, the Super 7 stuff, the ultimates are bigger, but they all seem to be in scale. I'm good with that. Because I'm doing the Super 7 Ultimates Turtles, Super 7 Ultimates can kind of fit into that world a little bit. But, Cyberzoic is 118, so I'm not, like I said, I don't have a hard and fast rule about scale. 1/6 doesn't work for me because it's too big. So that fits into the rule of like, can I fit it anywhere? And so 112 doesn't typically fly. Or sorry, 1/6 doesn't really work for my collection because they're effectively too big for almost every shelf. This shelf is I think 9 inches from one shelf to the next. This is big enough for vehicles and it would fit, 1/6, but I think, but I don't think I'd be able to fit hardly anything on that shelf otherwise. So, um, other rules that I have. I try, and again, this is a parameter one. I try to get things that are from toy line that are sort of reimaginings or modern versions of toys that I had growing up. So I like to stick to vintage IPs that I had and loved as a kid. What do I mean by that? I had tons of Ninja Turtles, I had tons of GI Joes. Um, I had a couple other lines, and those are sort of the ones that I tend to go for. So even though something like Street Sharks will come out and they look really cool, or Biker Mice from Mars, or insert a mid to late 80s, early 90s IP in there. If it wasn't something that I had then, it's probably not something that I need now because I'm also open to new IPs, and Animal Wars: The Kingdom is a perfect example of that. But by extension, if it's a new IP, it has to sort of speak to me in terms of the lore in the way that other toy lines did. I really, really, really like to get into the world, which is part of the reason that by and large things end up a full shelf. Um, I totally understand the like picking up a figure or whatever item because it's a really really cool item because it's well designed, because it's well sculpted, because the paint apps are amazing, whatever the reason is. But for me, ultimately, everything that I buy is a toy. Um and I intend to play with them. They come off the shelf, and I like to at least have some framework within um that I can sort of play within. I like to know which characters are the good guys and the bad guys and things like that, if that makes sense. Um and then it's obviously I didn't collect Chester Cheetah toys as a kid because there weren't any, but it's a one-off. And obviously I didn't collect Animal Warriors of the Kingdom because they didn't exist, but the lore is enough to pull me in so that I want the characters and I want all that. So that's that. It's not a rule per se, and I've said this before that, like, I will make exceptions, price if price point be damned if it's something that's absolutely amazing or whatever. But I do see these as toys, and so I don't tend to buy things with a really large price tag, because I in my brain I kind of look at it and I kind of go like, okay, well, how many figures from another line could I get, and will I enjoy this one more than getting those? So there is sort of a budget thing there that does play in, but sometimes you just got to make exceptions. Star says, who are the captain's enemies? I honestly, I couldn't tell you. Like, I know of Captain Canuck as sort of an icon within the sort of Canadian comic world, but I couldn't name, his sidekick or his team or his nemesis or anything like that, which again is why I'm really on the fence about this one. I love that this exists, and I love that it's out there, and I hope that this figure is really successful, but it's probably admittedly going to be a pass for me, because I had to get Dragon Ball GT figures instead, get other stuff, right? I had to buy a Rattler instead. Um, um, oh, where's that? Brick says, where does the term Canuck come from? Tied to a particular language, folksy made up term? I don't know. I have no idea. The weird thing is, it's used, um it's used sort of interchangeably with Canadian. I don't know where it came from, and it's just, yeah, it just, I'm looking it up right now just out of curiosity. Um, so it's relative. Well, Wikipedia says that the terms, it claims that the origin is uncertain, but it actually comes, that it was an Americanism that originally referred to Dutch Canadians. Hmm, interesting. Anyway, I'm gonna look into that, because it's sort of one of those things. The term's been around for like for as long as Canada's been around, I think. Um, or close to. So it's used. I think originally it was somewhat derogatory, but now I don't think any Canadian, would take any offense to being called a Canuck. Um, so let's see. Yeah, and Amanda said it was maybe a bit of a play on another word that people changed. Yeah, so there's some First Nations words that are similar. So, like, Canada comes from a First Nations word, but um there's also, some influence from some other things, that sort of the name comes from, apparently. And it actually says, now I don't know how accurate this would be or not. It actually says that the term comes from an influx of Hawaiians to British Columbia. So that's a part of British Columbian and Canadian history that I'm not even familiar with. So I'm actually really intrigued by this, and I want to learn more. So stay tuned for a later episode where we delve into the origin of the etymology of Canuck. But we won't linger on it too long today. Um, Thanos says, I'm not even sure I have room for what I have on pre-order. That's honestly, that's a really, really good point, because I'm kind of in that boat too. I've got Animal Warriors of the Kingdom second Kickstarter stuff coming. I've got all the Cyberzoic Kickstarter stuff coming. I've got Mythic Legions that I've got on pre-order. I've got SH Figure Arts that I've got on pre-order. I'm sure I've got more GI Joes on pre-order. I've got Thundercats and TMNT Ultimates on pre-order. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm literally looking around thinking, is there anywhere I can put another shelf? Is there anything on a shelf that I can get rid of? I still gotta I My vintage GI Joe stuff got compacted down to one single shelf, but I never pull them down. So maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to get rid of those ones. Um my Star Wars Black series very rarely comes off the shelf. But that being said, I'm not really collecting more of them, so they're not I will see. Um Brick says space and sticking to certain lines has been your rule since I've known you, but Cyberzoic, Motu Origins, and Street Fighter are now things. Thought on how this happens. I yes, there are thoughts on how that happens. To be perfectly honest, it's sort of like when a new toy line comes out that's like worthy, I make it fit. I make it fit. Motu Origins is a funny one because Motu Origins is 100% like a line that my kids can play with, and it's a line that I've really not spent very much on to get the absurd volume of figures that I've got. I've got Snake Mountain and I've got Gray Skull. I've got a whole bunch of vehicles. I've got way too many figures. But they don't get a shelf. They don't get a shelf. They're all in a bin because those get played with very often. They get pulled out and messed around with, and I have to put swords in hands over and over and over and over again because George knocks it out and he can't put the sword back in the hand, but he insists that they have to have their swords. But all the figures and pretty much all the vehicles are binned in sort of for the purpose of them being easier to take out and put away. Grayskull and Snake Mountain are actually on our next to our TV, one on either side, which is actually really awesome. That's their new home. I don't know how that got through the rule of not having my toys in the living room, but they're the kids' toys, so I guess that's the exception. Street Fighter is like those are just undeniably good. The reality is though they don't have a shelf either, so they're just sitting next to me in a pile of stuff that doesn't have a shelf. Cyberzoic, I've started a shelf, but it's above the GI Joe here. It's gonna expand. I'm just trying to figure out where they're gonna go because they look so good. And now that I have a few dinos in hand, I think there's gonna be more Cyberzoic in my future. It's also the case that, like, with Marvel Legends, I can't remember the last time I bought a Marvel Legends figure. Marvel Legends used to take up, like, 5 or 6 shelves. Now it's 3. I Age of Apocalypse is still on the very top shelf, which you can't see. But, that might get this shelf is just villains, so I could, the villains could live somewhere else. My kids love playing with Marvel Legends. Maybe they'll just be a bin thing where they can get played with more, and I can not worry about them being on display. And if that's the case, then I can put more another Cyberzoic shelf or whatever. So it kind of ebbs and flows. Like I don't buy one-offs. So, it's sort of like, okay, what lines am I currently buying? And the honest answer is not many. It just so happens that some of them are producing a lot of figures. So like GI Joe classified, like actively buying. I mean, Motu Origins and Masterverse, I'll pick up when I find them on sale or sort of see them on discount or somebody has one to get rid of. But I wouldn't say that I'm actively buying them. Lines that I'm actively buying are Animal Wars of the Kingdom, SH Figure Arts, Dragon Ball stuff, GI Joe Classified. Um, the actively buying is weird because the ultimates don't come out that often, so it's sort of like one or two here and there, but I'm actively buying them. Mythic Legions, I've slowed down a whole bunch. Marvel Legends, I'm basically not buying. Black Series, I'm pretty good. Um, I'm just kind of looking around and thinking about other things. I mean, I'll buy that Tony the Tiger figure, the Frosted Flakes Tony the Tiger figure from Jada. Um, what else? If there was a line that did astronauts and zombies, I'd probably buy that because that would be probably the best line ever. But that's about it. That's about it. Like, I mean, I feel like I buy a lot of toys, but I don't actually actively buy a lot of lines. So, um, Nolan says picked up the biker mice. Wasn't expecting to get the bikes, but ended up ordering those too. Man, if you get the mice, you have to get the bikes. That's to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. They look amazing, but as I said, space and not a line that I really collected. Those Street Sharks too are like really, really cool. I think I could make an exception if they did the killer whale. I think he might fit in the Island of Misfits. Solo Center, yeah. Misfit shelf so important. Masterpiece Soundwave, Super 7 Michelangelo, Motu Classics He-Man, NECA Flash Gordon, and others live happily together on the same shelf, and a Plunderling. Yeah, exactly. Right now, my Misfit toy shelf is like a couple Transformers, Chester Cheetah, the Heat Boys Mecha Leonardo, which is amazing, but I had intended to get all of them, all the turtles, and I don't think I'm going to. It's too big and too heavy for my kids to play with. It's amazing. It was in my top 10 figures for 2023. It's so impressive. Like I can't stress how cool that figure is, but it doesn't really scale with anything else. It doesn't really play well with anything else. And so apart from getting more of them, it's sort of a one and done. They're so good though. They're so good and I wish I could get the other ones. Maybe one day we'll see, but um Brick says rule number 1, have fun. That's yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. That's kind of it. And in a big way, right? Like if a line's no longer fun either to collect or my kids aren't interested, that's a big one too. I don't mention that one often, but like most toy purchases I actually run by my kids. I'll show them something that I'm interested in and I'm like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" If they go, "Oh yeah, it's cool." I'm like, "Okay, I don't need it." And if I show my kids something and they go, "Are you getting that?" What they mean is, "We want that. We want to play with it." So there's definitely an element there of not a rule, but if it doesn't pass the litmus test of my children getting excited, then I'm probably not going to get it. So, um, let's see. Um, um, and then Brick asked a question, and I'm actually starring people's answers, and I'll come around to that. Um, Nolan says he believes Canuck came from World War One. It did not, according to Wikipedia, but I don't know. It does sound like it's been sort of influenced and adapted over the years, but um, hold on, I'm trying to. Red Five says I had rules, but this year I switched to things that are nostalgic. I now have a random shelf that I love. Perfect. Do it. Do what you love. I think that's ultimately I think my rules are like my actual rules are buy what's fun and buy what I love. And if it's not fun and I don't love it, I should just not buy it. That's you I could sum all my rules up in there, I think. Um, um Red 5 says also they have to be in that 6 to 7 inch scale. Fair enough. Yeah. The Full Force Podcast. What's going on? Good to have you. I'm just talking about my toy collecting rules or lack thereof. Um, yeah, let's see. Yeah, I know. I'd say we haven't chatted in a while, and I apologize for that. Every time I miss your videos on Saturday mornings, I think I think of you fondly. I'll have to reach out soon. I don't think you and I have even talked about the Rattler at all, which we should definitely do. Um, let's see. Now people are talking about Amanda says Amanda says I've given up on life. That is how things have gotten out to the living room. Yeah, well, she just kind of stopped fighting it. They started most of my toys got played with in my office, and then they slowly started migrating into the hallway outside my office, and then they slowly started migrating into the living room, and then they slowly stopped migrating back into the living room. So yeah. Um, she says she's outnumbered when it comes to toys. All my kids are into most of the toys that I collect, and that's as I said, they have to pass that litmus test, which is why she's kind of out of luck in that respect. Um, Mick says Tony the Tiger and Scooby Doo from Jada is interesting. That Scooby Doo line, yeah, that Scooby Doo line is pretty cool. Initially, I thought, okay, I could probably get those, and then again, where would I put them? Is it something that I need, or is it just something that's cool that I would want? And I think it's something that's cool that I would want, but I don't think I'll actually get that Scooby Doo stuff, although it does look awesome. Um, let's see. Let's see. Nolan says just have to remember it's about having fun and bonding with the kiddos. Absolutely. I genuinely think if my kids weren't interested in toys at all, I don't think I'd buy I wouldn't buy any more toys. I think I'd kind of just it would be lame and boring to just sit in here by myself if the kids weren't sort of interested in it. Um let's see, let's see. Red 5 says our wives keep us in check. My wife always asks, "Do you need another Batman?" Oh, that comes to another rule that I have. Going back to, I think Solo Sinner said, one of every character is fine. I typically go for one of every character. There's a few characters that I had that I make exceptions for. Um, Luke Skywalker. I love Luke Skywalker, and he has so many iconic versions that I have multiple, versions of Luke Skywalker. Snake Eyes is my favorite, and I just absolutely love that, like, from like the vintage version 1 to the vintage version 4, there's such a dramatic change, and there's so many versions of Snake Eyes, and I love all of them. And so he's one that I'll buy. I'll buy pretty much any version of Snake Eyes that Hasbro puts out. Um, I'm trying to think if there's an exception. Is there like is there something they could do that would make me not buy a version? And I don't think there is. So far, I've got every version that they've done, and there's still a whole bunch that I want. So, yeah, one per character is pretty good for me. Now, if somebody does a version 2, I'll kind of get rid of a version 1. But I'm struggling a little bit with some of the GI Joe classified stuff because the retro Scarlet is amazing, but that first wave Scarlet I still think is so good. It's such a good figure. Duke is the same. That wave 1 Duke is so good. But the retro Duke is pretty good too. and it kind of hits in the feels a little bit differently. Um, Beachhead, I'm on the fence. I haven't ordered the retro Beachhead, but it looks really good. But the Cobra Island Beachhead is really really good too. So that's one that there's exceptions to sometimes if the versions are different enough. Um, Rattler chat, Chatler. I love it. Um, Thanos says I was considering hallway shelves earlier. I've seen people do hallway shelves. I I would not be allowed to do hallway shelves. Um, Star says I was talking about that same thing last night with a collecting friend. We both want to stop buying figures and save some money. We both agree that it's probably not happening soon. Yes. Yep. Pretty much. Um, Red 5 says my 2-year-old is learning to play with action figures. When he grabs them from my shelves, he always tries not to knock them down. Recently, he's been trying to pose figures. That's awesome. My son, who is also 2, will kind of come into the room and kind of like stand and look at shelves and kind of look at me and look at shelves and look at me and kind of be like, can I take these? There's some that he's allowed to go and run around with. Motu Origins and AWalk are sort of the two that he gravitates to the most. So those ones, no problem. He can run around with those all day. Mythic Legions, not too much. Too many pointy bits. Too many bits that might fall off. Amanda says nope to hallway shelves. Yep, pretty much. All right. To the starred comments. Brick. That's my rules. All right. So we're at 52 minutes. Let's get into comments and questions. As I said, if you guys have any questions for me, we'll do sort of open Q&A. This was Brick's question. He says, "What new IP from the last 10 years would you hands down, I think he meant start collecting if they made good toys? Rules be damned." Hmm, that's a very good question. And I think about this all the time when there's an IP that doesn't have toys. Dragon Prince, I think is very, very toyetic. I think I think that line would be really, really good. I don't know who would do it, and then that therein lies the problem. It's sort of like I would still need them to be good figures. I would still need them to be um better than what the Avatar figures were, for example. The Avatar figures aren't bad, but they're not good. Um so it would be I wouldn't I would want Dragon Prince if they were really really good. Um where was it? Ray Pat said Blue-Eyed Samurai. So good. Those would be so good. I am 100% gonna be pushing Dan Mitchell to, to not, blatantly rip off some of those characters. But, if there was some influence kind of come into the Bushido line by way of Blue Eye Samurai, I wouldn't be complaining about that. Because I agree. I think that's a good one. That would be a cool one to see. Star had a bunch. Although he or maybe that's a question for me. I'll circle back to that one. Star answered Brick's question. He said GTA 5 RDR one half video game figures. So Grand Theft Auto 5? I don't know what RDR is. I don't play video games. I guess I outed myself as a non-video game player by not knowing what those are, probably. And Star said better screen accurate die cast 112 scale of all the Bumblebee movie characters. 112 though, for those, they would be, what would they be, like 14, 16 inches tall? They'd be big, wouldn't they? Like, how big are they on screen? So that would be that's where it gets hard for something like that, right? Because they'd just be really, really big. And Star also says, wishing we had great 112 scale figures of the Alien Legion comic characters. There's a ton of comic books. I will say that, like we talked about some comic book stuff a couple weeks ago. There's a lot of image books that have a lot of really great character design that I would love to see in action figure form. Star says, still waiting 112 scale figures from the original Blade Runner. I think we can let that one pass because if you did a line, you could include like the Blade Runner sequel stuff, and so that's still relevant because that's within the last 10 years. Ray Paz, I'll give you this one too because I think they're still printing Inkall. Um, Inkall is very toyetic. I think that could work very, very well. Um, Star says I would have put the Cyberpunk Edge Runners on that list, but yeah, Jada Toys is already doing them. Okay, I promised I would watch Cyberpunk Edge Runners. I watched 4 episodes. It's just not for me. It's not my thing. I'm sorry. I tried. I watched some, but it just doesn't it just didn't grab me. It didn't grab me and I watched, like I said, I watched 4 episodes. I sat down and watched 2 episodes. I didn't really love it, but I still went back a couple days later and watched episodes 3 and 4, and I still just didn't. It just didn't grab me. So, um, let's see. Let's see. I'm bouncing back and forth between the live comments and the starred comments. So, um, Red Five says I lowered the shelf for my AWOC. Those are safe for playing. They totally are, which is so awesome. I absolutely love how easy it is um, for kids to get into those. Um, let's see here. Brick, I see you answered your own question. I'll get to that one in a sec. Um, um, let's see. Let's see. Okay, jumping back into it, Brick's question. I think that's Star says I would buy quality figures of all the Panther cartoon characters like the Inspector, Texas Toad, Mr. Jaws. That would be great. I think there's definitely a market for and I don't even think they would have to be like crazy articulated. I think like what Jada's doing with something like Chester Cheetah or Scooby Doo would be perfectly suited for a lot of that stuff. But anyways, we'll kind of move on from that question. That's a great question though. Let's see. Ray had a question for Amanda, but did you like Gem? Would you get those if they were a 6-inch line? I'm a dude, and I think I would pick them up. I used to watch the show with my kid sister. I mean, if she didn't, I probably would. But her reply was, I would be tempted for sure, but I'm trying to stick to Princess of Power and only a couple randoms that I love from some lines. Um, I'm still hoping that they do more Princess of Power stuff in Origins because we would definitely get the Crystal Castle, and I would love to get some of the mounts and some of the other characters and on and on and on. Because we do have 2 girls and then Amanda, so that she could sort of share that with them. Um, she doesn't go for the Motu stuff quite as much. So, um, yeah, Brick in response to his own question said Red Dead Redemption. Chicken Fried Toys is doing a 1/18 scale kind of Western line, and that might be about as close to Red Dead Redemption as we might get for a long time. But they're really cool figures. They were right across from us at Joe Fest. So, um, and Brick says I would get a few from Gem and try to give them space armor for capes. Yeah, that would be cool. And they could cross over, right? I think aesthetically, they're pretty well suited to sort of fit anywhere. They've got they've got that futuristic thing going on with the makeup and the colors and all that kind of stuff. So I think they could fit, in your Edge Runners shelf if you want to go that way still. Thanos said, for video games, I'd love to see new Legacy of Kain figures. No idea what Legacy of Kain is um, at all. um, Star says, any wish list figures that don't exist. For me, Reveltech Amazing Yamaguchi Original Alien and Original Predator. Maybe one day. Do I have any? There are, yes and no. There's so many things that come out that honestly, I'm at a point where I don't really wish that anything ever comes out. I would almost be happier if nothing ever came out again, and I could, I would love if the toy companies just put the brakes on me buying more toys naturally by just not making any more cool toys. It's not going to happen. So instead, I kind of am happy to just let the releases, that the factories that the companies want to do come. Um, there's probably, if I really sat down and hammered it out, there's definitely a list of things that I would want. As I mentioned, we did the episode where we talked about comic books that would be fantastic action figures. I would love Wildcats figures. I would love Gen 13 figures. I would love a few other teams and a few other characters. If they never get made, I won't be unhappy or I won't be upset because there's so much cool stuff. I'm looking at a desk full of toys. I'm looking at shelves full of toys. Like, so I guess it's sort of like there's lots of cool stuff that I would buy if it came out, but if it never comes out, it's probably for the best, if that makes sense. Um, let's see. Oh, RDR is Red Dead Redemption. Okay, there. Yes. Okay. Um, Star says a music line would be great. Super 7's already doing a lot of reaction stuff with music, and they're doing some ultimate stuff too. So it's kind of out there already. It's just I guess they can't do everything. They can't do every um artist. I wonder if some are more expensive than others. I wonder, like I'm looking at your list there, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and the Doors. I wonder if it comes down to licensing pricing. Um Evo Genius says a line from the Alien versus Predator arcade game will be fun. I just played that game for the first time at Joe Fest. It's a fun game. Um and I think at one point, and I could be wrong. So it's either they did either they've made some of those figures or they had intended to make some of those figures and then they never made it to market, I think. Um but I can't remember what line it was. David Silva from Creative Beast was talking about that. I can't remember if he said that he had sculpted them all and they never made them, or if he had made them and they had produced them. I can't remember. So they might be out there. So I don't know if so I don't know where that one sort of stands, but um Thanos says I was having a hard time with newer property ideas, but I'd love a Spear and Fang from Primal. Uh okay, it's been a long time since I watched Primal. Spear and Fang are basically the caveman and the dinosaur, right? I think, you could get a think you could probably do your own almost, because that's kind of one of those ones where it wouldn't make a whole line. So I think that's a great one for like customizing, right? Because you could you could get a Brutal Realms figure, customize it, and then get like the super colossal T-Rex that came out in Jurassic Park line. There you go. You got it. I was a couple years back now. I was considering trying to do And now I'm totally blanking on her name. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. When that super colossal T-Rex came out, I was like, okay, so all you'd have to do is paint this thing red and sculpt, a little bit more on the head. But how would you make Moon Girl? She's so distinct and so unique. And I'm still shocked that Marvel Legends hasn't tried to do something like that because I feel like that would be a really, really fun toy, and I think it could be I think it could be a success. As I'm saying it, I think to myself, "Yeah, but they did Squirrel Girl, and yeah, that was a instantly discount thing, so, yeah, maybe not." Um, you might get a bunch of Extreme Studios comics characters from Loose Collector. That's true. That's a good point. I'm not I was always more of a Wildstorms guy. The Extreme Studio stuff was never the teams that I they weren't my teams. So, if we do, great for somebody, but not for me. So like I said, I'm kind of thankful if they don't. What's going on, No Chewin? Good to have you. Always. Um, Man says, but how does everybody feel about zombie astronauts? How will those fit into your rules? There's a workaround for that. And I will get to that because um, Star says, but it wouldn't be authentic primal. I get it. I totally get it, and I totally understand. So that would be yeah. It would be cool if they did them like in that particular art style and everything. Definitely, definitely. Um, I'm gonna answer one more question, and then I will talk about the zombies. John says, what movie or TV show would you watch again for the first time? I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Do you mean like if you could sort of go back and watch it for the first time, like through like my eyes now and sort of okay, so I've always thought this. And this is like and maybe this doesn't make sense because maybe everybody watched them in the right order or whatever. I have always wished that I could watch Star Wars over again. Like with everything that exists now, I wish I could watch it over again. Um like in chronological order. And so like prequel stuff and the Acolyte and prequel stuff and then watch A New Hope and then watch but I'm not sure if it would spoil Empire Strikes Back. I guess ultimately it's sort of like I watched Return of the Jedi first for Star Wars, which is still my favorite, and I still think it's the best. You'll never change my mind that Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars that we've ever gotten. But when I watched Empire Strikes Back, I knew who Vader was. So there was a little less impact, when Luke learns that Vader is his father, when you already know that Luke knows that Vader is his father. So if I understand your question correctly, my answer would be I wish I could watch Star Wars um over again. But I think I would kind of like to like and that's where I'm torn. Would I want to watch A New Hope first and sort of watch them in the order that they were made, or would I want to watch them in chronological order based on like the timeline, the canon timeline? I don't know, but that would be mine. And Star says, I remember Star Wars when it first came out in 1977. The world went nuts. Yeah, and that's like I said, I watched Return of the Jedi when I was 5 years old, which would have been 1987, on VHS in the basement of my sort of after kindergarten babysitter who had a bunch of little kids in the house, and they said, "Okay, you're older. What do you want to do? Do you want to just watch TV?" And so I would watch Return of the Jedi like almost every day. And I'm pretty sure they had the box set. Like I'm pretty sure they had all three of the movies, but for whatever reason, I always just watched Return of the Jedi. And then, if memory serves, then I watched Empire Strikes Back, and then it was like literally, I think it was years later before I watched A New Hope. Um, Star says, I wish I could have seen Jaws at the theater in 1975. I was 5 and my mom and dad wouldn't take me. Fun fact, I've never seen Jaws. And every time I sit down thinking, okay, I'm going to watch it now, I choose something else. It just doesn't, it doesn't, I'm sure it's a great movie. I know it's a great movie. It's a classic. But I know the plot. I know what happens. I'll some one day it's like Edge Runners. I'll get around to watching it someday. Star. I always forget that one when people talk about like, oh, you've never seen whatever. I've never seen Jaws. I've never seen any of the Jaws movies. Um, but anyways, um, and John says, yeah, watch it again without your memory of it, like getting to experience it for the first time again. It would be Star Wars. It would be Star Wars because I still watch them. I try to watch them like every year in May, believe it or not. And they still hold up. They're still so good. Like the original trilogy is still so good. I still love it so much. And I think that's, and I guess everybody sort of goes their different way with that. But for me, it's sort of like those ones are still so good and so deeply ingrained in like everything that I like that that I love everything that they make that's Star Wars. I enjoyed the Acolyte. I get why people didn't. I enjoyed the Obi-Wan show. I enjoy all of it. It's all different. It's all got its own quirks and, objectively some are better than others. Not everything can be good. Not everything can be Return of the Jedi. So that's but yeah, if I could go back and experience Star Wars for the first time, and at the very least, watch A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi in that order, I think that would be the one for me. Oh, Battlestar Galactica would be a good one too. But I watched that way later in life. So sorry, I'm just trying to star a couple more comments here. And then I'll Ray says, well, not that one. Ray Pass says you'd enjoy it more than you think. I'm sure I would. That's the thing. Like I love those movies. Last weekend, my 8-year-old decided that she wanted to sort of know a little bit more about like zombies and stuff, and for some reason we were gonna watch 28 Days Later, and I was like, let's go back. We're gonna start with Night of the Living Dead, the original George A. Romero Night of the Living Dead, black and white, low budget, really simple, straightforward, but it's still so effective. I think we made it 18 minutes in, and she was like, "That's enough. I've had enough." And I think and then I was sort of like sent her off to bed, and she was like, "Why did you make me watch, or why did you let me watch that?" Um, yeah. Um, and my wife says he knows that I don't go in the ocean because of Jaws. Um, yeah, Jaws. She is terrified of open water, not just the ocean. She doesn't particularly like the lake. Um, but yeah, she's a good sport. When we go to Hawaii, she does snorkel a little bit. As long as she can see the bottom and it's like too shallow for giant sharks, she's usually pretty good. Allison Troy's here. Good day, Allison. Good to have you. What if they remake the original trilogy? How many would hate that? Tons of people, but but who cares, right? You do what you want. Them remaking something or redoing something or whatever. It doesn't diminish my love for the things that came before it. So that's why I never get angry about people doing new stuff. It doesn't mean I have to like it. It just means that I'm not angry about it. Star. I remember seeing Star Trek 2 at the theater and crying my eyes out. I still haven't gotten over the death of Spock. He came back. It's fine. Um, Amanda says Ogopogo is why I don't go in Okanagan Lake. So my wife doesn't swim in open water for fear of fake fictional things getting her. And Pinocchio got eaten by a whale. When a puppet got eaten by a whale, it put an indelibly traumatic mark on my wife. So Nolan says that's why I didn't go boating on the lake. There's no monsters. There's more monsters on the lake than there is in the lake. All right, so we'll spend a few minutes on this just because I've been withholding, I guess. I think a little. It seems as though people want more information about zombies from Mars. So should we talk about zombies from Mars for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Did I show pictures last time? I can't remember. Should I show pictures? Where are my pictures here? I don't have them up, so I'd have to find them. I can show a couple things. Where are they here? I got to be careful that I don't show all the things because there's some fun stuff that we got planned, but we want to sort of hold it back. We still want to make sure that we've got stuff that people haven't seen when we get to the Kickstarter. We want to make sure that that there's like reveals that are worth people kind of paying attention to. We want people to be, along for the ride. But okay, let me sort of look at these comments and then I'll talk a little bit about it. So Star says, need more info from zombies from Mars. Here's one thing. Officially, it is space zombies from Mars. So that's your first little sort of tidbit. Star says, anxious to see how the zombies from Mars and Spark figures turn out. So Spark is also going to be something that potentially we would work on with the company. So I guess I need to backtrack. Arlen Peltier is a sculptor that probably, I would be shocked if all of you don't own an action figure that Arlen has sculpted. He's been doing it pretty much full time for more than a decade. He's done Marvel. He's done he's done Marvel Legends. He's done other stuff for Hasbro. He's done a bunch of the Fresh Monkey Fiction stuff. He's done on and on and on. There's other stuff that he's done that he doesn't, necessarily have his name attached to. So I'm not going to sort of out him for some of the things that he's sculpted, that, publicly, his name isn't on them. Needless to say, he's done a whole bunch of stuff. He is a fantastic sculptor. He is a really, really thorough sculptor. And so that's what I've sort of gleaned from some of the conversations that I've had with him, is that, not only is he trying to sculpt something that looks good, but it has to be functional. So form and function have to work together, and sort of make up a good action figure. So he's thinking about the engineering and the articulation while he's sculpting. So when I met him at Joe Fest, and we started talking about toys, and we started talking about, what I was doing with Spiro and how I was involved. What I didn't know is that I was basically being interviewed. He was there with his brother Ira, and Arlen and Ira have created this line with lore behind it. So there's a comic book plan. So we're gonna have sort of issue one, as part of the Kickstarter. There's other things to go along with the Kickstarter that are going to be a lot of fun, but I'll sort of hold back on some of that stuff. But yeah, he was basically him and his brother were basically interviewing me and sort of trying to get a feel of like who I was and what I could sort of do and whether or not I would want to be involved in this project. And so after a couple of conversations at Joe Fest, and then several hours and a couple drinks and a meal in airports later, we basically sort of went our separate ways with the idea that we were going to start a toy company. And so that's what we're in the process of doing now. I had to get permission from my wife because it is time consuming, and my wonderful wife is very accommodating. She doesn't always like it, but she's always accommodating. So it's sort of thanks to her, big time thanks to her, that I'm able to do this. Um, and so we're doing zombies. We're doing space zombies from Mars. I'm really excited about it. So it's astronauts and zombies. Arlen's got other things, other lines, other lines that he's got in mind. So Arlen has another project. It's called Unslain. So it's sort of like a medieval sword and sorcery type line that he tried a Kickstarter for it. He and I have talked about it, and I said, look, here are sort of three things that I think you should have done differently. So Unslain is in the mix. Spark is in the mix. So it's kind of like there's a past line, a present line, and a future line. They may or may not end up inhabiting sort of the same universe. It remains to be seen. There's no sort of formal timeline for how they're connected or anything like that, or even if they will be connected. But there that may come up in due time. So um um as Star says, it'll be awesome to see space zombies succeed where Star Trek's Borg dropped the ball. Can't wait. I used to love the Borg. There was a time where I was quite a big Next Generation fan, and I used to love the Borg episodes. Red 5 said they crash landed into a different toy universe. Last surviving human made it to the Awok world, and Lady Jadu experiments on him, and now he's a zombie. Totally supporting Adam. No, there's a story there. But so Amanda's question was how does this get around the rules for my toy collecting? Easily, because I don't have to buy these. I'll own the company, so I will just get these. So that's the way around for that one. Red 5 says when will the Kickstarter be? That is still very much up in the air. So we know more or less what the offerings will be for the Kickstarter. We know more or less that we're looking at basically four figures plus a Kickstarter exclusive for the initial offering. And then a couple other things that will be available in the initial offering. And then we've got 6 more figures that will be unlock goals, as well as some other unlock goals. So we've sort of mapped that part out. That's kind of the easy part. As I've said before, the harder part is like getting the business all lined up. The harder part is making sure that we've done absolutely everything that we can do before we launch the Kickstarter, so that there's no confusion about the Kickstarter, so that there's no delays, after the Kickstarter, so that there's no confusion as to like what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, where we're doing it, who we're doing it with. A lot of that's already lined up. The sculpting is already done. The engineering is, the sort of primary engineering, is basically done. The factory, um, doesn't have the samples yet, but the quotes for molds are done, based on sort of preliminary, like, hey, here's what we plan to do. What would the molds cost? We've looked at shipping costs. We're sort of mapping out. We're going to do the Kickstarter. The idea, the goal, the sort of plan at this time is that the Kickstarter will be the only place to get them during the Kickstarter. Following the Kickstarter, we will open up a small select few retailers that you will be able to pre-order from. But the idea there is that we don't want to lean on retailers to be contributing to the Kickstarter. Um, there's several reasons that it doesn't necessarily benefit a Kickstarter to have retailers backing them, but we will also be very transparent about why we're making retailers wait, how much it benefits us that people go through the Kickstarter rather than through a third party retailer, and so on and so forth. And we've seen too that there's been a lot of people sort of asking about not even for this line, but for other lines. We've seen people sort of wanting to know, like, what is the process for making toys? So part of what we want to do is sort of include the process. So, like, through our updates through the Kickstarter and through sort of social media stuff, we want to share the whole process of how toys are made, because I think it really interests some people, and there's other people that won't care at all. But the hope is that people will have a better understanding of like why things take so long and how much things cost, and why pricing is what it is, and so on and so forth. Because I think once you have a better idea of that, hopefully you have a little bit more appreciation of it, and then you can sort of see where, like, the big guys work differently than the small guys, and so on and so forth. So I'm very much fascinated by the ins and outs of how this is all done, how things get made. And so I really, really want to push to have that stuff, that knowledge, sort of available to other people. um but as far as when does the Kickstarter go, to sort of directly answer your question there, as soon as it's ready. As soon as it's ready. We're not going to rush it. Arlen and I have had sort of very, very objective conversations about, we're not going to launch it until we're 100% satisfied with what it looks like, and that all the information is like nailed down, so that we don't have to kind of swerve and adjust and adapt as we go. um Trying to learn from past mistakes, trying to I literally spent, this morning I spent several hours going through Kickstarters, both successful Kickstarters and failed Kickstarters, just to sort of look at how they map them out, and how do they do their graphics, and how many rewards before it gets confusing. How do people respond to different types of rewards, and so on and so forth. So we want to really do it right, and we want to because we want it to be successful. Full disclosure, we hope that it makes money. So that's sort of where we're at with that. Thanos asked, will your line have an Amanda tribute figure? um the intent, I don't like to influence the creative aspect of toy lines. I am very much the hands off, behind the scenes emails and logistical. I rent the minivans. You know what I mean? Like, so I won't push for it. If there is a possibility for it, if there's room for it, if we need something along those lines, then absolutely there will be. What I will say is, and this is more my personality than sort of anything else. If there's ever a tribute figure, you might never know that it's a tribute figure. My wife will know, um, but you guys might never know. I mean, if there's a character named Amanda something, then maybe that's a dead giveaway if we go that route. But there's there's other ways that you can have sort of nods to people without just absolutely banging you over the head and having one of the astronauts be called Amanda and have it look like Amanda. So we'll see. I As I said, the only reason I'm able to do this is because of Amanda. So anywhere that I can get, you know, anywhere that I can pay tribute to my wife, I absolutely will. I just don't want anybody to know that I'm doing it besides her. Oh man, yeah. Um, Star says Space Zombies being its own story rocks. Not worried about them trying to be something else. That's the thing is like we want these to play nice with lots of other things. But we definitely want this to be something that people are into because of what it is. Um, what if the Kickstarter fails? Well, then we retool and maybe go again. Maybe we do something else. Amanda says Kickstarter fails. What does that even mean? That being said, like honestly though, like what if the Kickstarter fails? Arlen and I don't want to do a failed Kickstarter. So as I've said before, like we are trying to set this up in a way that it makes tons of sense, that it's easy and accessible, and that everybody will want a figure or two. Um, I think it's sort of one of those things where if we do this right, there's going to be collectors of other lines that will be more than happy to pick up an astronaut or two, even if they're not into the story, even if they're not into the world that we're going to be building. But then if people are into the world that we're going to be building, you're probably going to want, all the named characters. And then, you're going to want the other stuff that sort of goes with that. So, we're kind of looking at the numbers and trying to figure it all out, and we'll go from there. If it fails, it fails. That's just the world that we live in. There's a lot of stuff out there. We know we're competing against a lot of really great products. So we just want to be absolutely sure that when we launch the Kickstarter, we're 100% ready to launch the Kickstarter, and there can be no sort of regret that we sort of left anything on the table, or sort of left anything unexplained, or sort of not revealed that we could have, that maybe would have pushed us over the edge or whatever. But ultimately we're pretty confident that what we've got, and the numbers make pretty good sense. So stay tuned for that. But and Star said, wondering about that. Big Bad Toy Store having pre-orders up before the Kickstarter campaign even succeeds. How does that work? It's complicated and it's kind of clumsy, and that's why we don't necessarily want to do it, because we don't really want. Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but like I said, when we get there, we'll be talking about it in depth. And as I said, we will be very, very transparent about what we're doing and why and how and all that kind of stuff. So, Martin Birchall, probably. Do you have any plans to interview the film director? No. I don't. I wouldn't even know how to reach out to somebody like that. Also, I don't really talk about TV and film much. So it's not really in my wheelhouse. Star says, I was just wondering how a store can take orders for something that hasn't funded yet. What if it doesn't get funded? Then they just cancel them, I think. I don't know exactly how that works. I know that they've had not Kickstarter so much as like crowd-funded things where, like, if they don't hit a minimum order quantity, they don't make them. So I think because they don't take any money, they really just send you an email and say, oh, by the way, you're never getting that thing, so we'll never charge you money. So I think that's how that works. Oh, okay. So I think I understand your question here. So Stars says, I was actually thinking of lines that are up for pre-order on Big Bad Toy Store, lines that haven't been funded yet. Would Big Bad Toy Store just pass the orders onto the Kickstarter to bump up the numbers? And so that okay, so that's where the full transparency comes in. The answer is effectively not what people think. So, like, when Big Bad Toy Store gets a pre-order, say we launch with 4 figures, right? If Big Bad Toy Store gets, 10 orders for all 4 figures, that's, 40 figures. They don't necessarily have to give us the money. You know what I mean? Because they would be a retailer, they would buy, figures at a retail or discounted wholesale price. Um, and and that's how they can sort of contribute money to the Kickstarter if they want to. Um, but because of the way Kickstarters work, especially if you're doing like a backer kit where you can add things on after the fact, and they're doing it at like a discounted rate, there's a disconnect between like how many pre-orders they potentially get and how much money actually ends up in the Kickstarter funding money, if that makes sense. So, on top of that, because the retailer would buy the figures at a wholesale price, plus Kickstarter gets 4% off of that. You're then losing another 4%. So like it keeps being like diminishing margin from our perspective. Um, and it kind of skews the numbers a little bit. And there's a bunch of things going on in that way too. So it's complicated now. There are retailers that we know are on board. Like there's retailers that we know that will absolutely sell these figures. Um, and all of them would like to be the first retailer to be able to put these up for pre-order. So that's why I said there's going to be a small number of retailers that will get the figures for the pre-order sort of right after the Kickstarter. They will probably have them at a higher price point. They will we will have order cutoff dates for them to get pre-orders in, so we'll know what money we're sort of dealing with up front, and so on and so forth. And again, this is just things that I've learned through retail. This is things that I've learned through other toy companies that I've worked with or sort of chatted with or whatever. So we want to just make sure that we're doing it right, and doing it in a way that is sustainable as well. That's a big part of it. Is we don't want to do this and be like, you know, trying to make sure that we have, the money by the end. Like we want to make sure that we have all the money up front so that we're clear to the end so that we can be absolutely certain that everybody's going to get what they want and sort of go from there. If that all makes sense. But again, like I said, we'll talk about that more in the future when we're sort of launching this stuff. So Red 5, will you be working with eCollectibles? I talk with Mike all the time. We talk about different toy lines. He will definitely be the Canadian retailer for any toy lines that I'm involved in, basically. Allison, are you staying on with AWOC Spiro? Absolutely. I love those guys, and I'm having a blast with them. And I had a conversation with Jason and Arlen. Arlen sculpts for Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. So that was the connection between, Spiro and Arlen. And I talked to Jason, I talked to Arlen. I said, I still have to have a conversation. If I agree to do this, I want to have a conversation with Jason and make sure that he's still cool. And Jason has no issue. There's no conflict of interest. We're all just happy to play with toys. We're all playing in the same sandbox in a lot of ways. So it's way more fun if everybody gets along and plays nice. Allison Troy, this is, yeah, exactly. With Big Bag Toy Store, it says if it doesn't get made, the order will be canceled. And because they don't take money up front, it's easy for them to do it that way. So um Star says it was a bit confusing at first to see the new lines going up, so I thought they had already succeeded, and it was a done deal. Then I see they're still on Kickstarter and it's still open. Yeah, yeah, it's weird, and I will say this too. There's always people that don't quite understand that pre-ordering on Big Bad Toy Store doesn't You're not backing the Kickstarter? Uh, I don't know how, we'll try to address that, and we'll try to sort of mention that to people when the time comes, um but yeah, there's still people that sort of reach out to me with the Animal Wars of the Kingdom um um Kickstarter, and they say like, "Hey, I pre-ordered on Big Bad Toy Store. How where do I go? Like, what do I how do I see my order or whatever?" And I have to explain to them that we're not Big Bad Toy Store. That Big Bad Toy Store is in fact they're their own entity. They're a retailer that bought stuff from us. Anyways, enough talk. Um, this is what people want to see. So this will be in the initial offering. This is the first astronaut. I'm only going to show you one astronaut. I'm not going to show you the other one. This is Guy Garrison. So this is one of the main characters in the book, in the lore, and the first astronaut that we've got on offer. So there's there's some elements that may change. There's certainly some things that we're sort of going back and forth on. As it says at the bottom there, digital render shown, final product may vary. The final product may vary. The sculpting for the astronaut, the pack, and all that kind of stuff is basically done. But then, as far as the loadout goes and some of the accessories, there are some things that are still up in the air. As far as design goes, as far as what'll get packed in with the figures and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is sort of the initial offering. We'll have, as I said, 2 astronauts in the initial Kickstarter offering. And we will also have 2 red walkers. So the red walkers are the zombies. They're called red walkers because they're from Mars. Mars is the red planet, and they're walkers because they're zombies. I guess I don't know. There will be so basically you'll get an astronaut and sort of a zombie to match it color wise, and the second astronaut in the initial offering will be another color. So you see at the top there, you see at the top it says military, and it says the same thing. Says the same thing on this one. So for different sort of groups, you'll see different colors. So the military one is green. The other one that we're going to offer in the initial Kickstarter offering would be blue. Stay tuned on sort of what that one is, as far as category. This is a very good question. Allison Troy asks, how many lady astronauts? There will be as many. Oh no, that's not true. I was going to say there will be as many ladies as there are men. So the second astronaut will be a lady astronaut. And then we got a bad guy, and then we got 2 more astronauts who will be a man and a woman. So 1 more of each. So basically 2 men, 2 women, if we get all the stretch goals. And then a bad guy who is a guy. He's a bad guy and he's a bad guy. So that'll be that. We're gonna have, as I said, a Kickstarter exclusive and a couple other like fun things. And then all 4 astronauts will be different colored, and then you'll get a zombie to match, so that you can do your part swapping and stuff like that. So that's the plan. That's sort of the initial plan. As far as what you're going to see before the Kickstarter, you may only see these 2 that I've shown. The other stuff we want to hold a little bit closer to the chest and sort of play those cards as we get closer to sort of hype it up a little bit more. Can you hint at the possibility of alien zombies? Nothing. There's like nothing planned now. So there is no, there's no alien species as such. You'll have to sort of wait and see the lore as far as you'll have to wait and see. But this is what you get for zombies, basically like humans that have been zombified, if you will. Ray Black is here. What's going on? Good to have you. Jeff Moore says, when does this go up? When it is ready. I will say that, initially our conversation was that we wanted to do it in 2024. If that doesn't happen, it'll be because we're just not 100% on sort of being ready to launch. And we would rather, as I said, we would way rather wait and make sure that um like we ultimately what we don't want is we don't want to do a Kickstarter tomorrow and then the figures come out in like 2030. What we want is to be in a position where we know exactly what our turnaround time is going to be, and there's always delays, whatever, but we want to be in a position where we can pretty accurately and pretty confidently say when these are going to be available. And in a weird way, like the more we can do on the back end and the more we can do in the planning phase, the tighter we can make that window. So that's sort of where we're at. Um, any suggestion of story or narrative yet? Anything to whet the narrative palette? No, I'm not giving you anything. I'm gonna make you wait. I'm gonna make you wait. But yeah, it's Earth and Mars, so it's a world that's gonna be familiar, but it's gonna have elements that aren't familiar. Star says maybe put out snippets of story as news alerts or messages just to get people's enthusiasm aroused. Oh, don't worry, we will. That has been discussed. There is, yeah, there's. It's gonna be fun. Like we want the line to be fun. We want the sort of I'm pushing very much for. I will say this because it doesn't sort of spoil anything. But I'm strongly pushing for some influence from like War of the Worlds in the sense of it being a radio drama and like people thinking it was real and the sort of the 1960s and 70s kind of sci-fi vibe and elements from our world that are pulled straight from like our reality, but then other elements that are either anachronistic or out of place, out of time, foreign or what I always like in like the way the 60s and 70s saw the future, if that makes sense. Anyways, yeah. Star says X-Files feel. No, not really a X-Files. Not really a X-Files feel. In that respect, it'll be a bit different than that. Red 5, could this work with Monster Force? Okay, so I think this is I don't think this is much of a spoiler or anything like that. Arlen is very involved with a lot of the stuff that Bill at Fresh Monkey Fiction is doing. He's doing a lot of sculpting for Bill, Monster Force included. These will be made in the same factory. If all goes to plan, these will be made in the same factory that Monster Force is made in. They will be made in the same scale that Monster Force is be made in. If possible, and we suspect that it will, barring any changes by Fresh Monkey Fiction or the factory or whatever, there should be crossover compatibility potential with Monster Force and other Fresh Monkey Fiction lines. Hopefully, like I said, it's not 100% set in stone, and it won't be. Unfortunately, it kind of won't be until the figures get made, which is a really kind of weird reality of how toys are made. But the hope is that there will be interchangeability there. Around the time people are getting their tax returns would be a good time to have the Kickstarter. You know what? There's never a good time to have a Kickstarter. I will like, there's always something going on. There's always something happening. There's always like a reason not to do them. There's always a reason to do them. So we'll figure it out. So Derek Dalzell says, I remember seeing this line at PowerCon last year. Yes, absolutely. As I've said, Arlen's had the sculpting done for a while, and he's just not had a venue, a platform to do it, which is, you know, where our conversations kind of started. So we will be we'll be doing it together. Jeff, maybe these will come out before Monster Force does. No, the Monster Force stuff is getting packed up. So there's Monster Force stuff probably on the way. You'll have Monster Force stuff before this stuff. Don't worry. Red 5 says, why couldn't you say no? I foresee that line in my future. I do too, but only for research purposes. So that's it will be a work related purchase. So I'll have to buy them. All right. We are well over time. I'm going to put this one back up just for a moment. We're well over time. I totally lost track of time. I meant to talk about this for about 5 minutes, and we're way over that. Brick is live already, so you don't have time for a bathroom break or to get something to drink or a snack. But I'm going to wrap it up, and then, you know, I expect all of you guys to jump over to Brick Something's channel and go check out what he's got going on in the news today. Anyways, been an absolute pleasure. As I always say, you know, I love talking toys with all of you guys, and I love hanging out, and you know, I appreciate everybody that's here. I appreciate everybody that's sort of showing interest, and anybody that's curious about the space zombies from Mars. I can't wait to share more, and I can't wait to talk about that, you know, in more depth, in more detail, because there's some cool stuff, and I'm very, very excited about it. But until next time, guys, bye-bye.